They said it violated HOA guidelines. Too bright. Too big. Too aggressive. But to Sergeant Leon Rivers, retired U.S. Army, that flag wasn't decoration. It was memory. A folded promise. A symbol of the people he lost and the parts of himself he never got back. So when they told him to take it down, he didn't just say no. He said, "Come and try." And that's when the war started, not overseas this time, but right on his front lawn. It was just past 7 a.m. in a suburban cul-de-sac outside Atlanta. Quiet, pristine, and surgically controlled by a well-funded homeowners association. The kind of neighborhood where mailboxes had to match, holiday lights had to come down by January 3rd, and kids riding scooters after 9 p.m. earned a warning. Leon Rivers stood on his porch, coffee in hand, watching the stars and stripes flap in the Georgia wind. The flagpole was bolted into his porch rail. Not crooked. Not frayed. Perfectly lit at night, just like federal guidelines said. He took a sip of his coffee and smiled. Behind him, inside his tidy home, medals glinted from a glass case in the living room. Bronze Star. Purple Heart. Army Commendation. A folded flag in a triangle box. The one they gave him when they sent back his best friend in a coffin. Leon had done 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan. He'd taken bullets for the country this flag represented. He never imagined he'd have to defend it again, against a man in a neon HOA vest. The first notice came tucked into his storm door. Bright orange. Terse language. Violation. Unauthorized flagpole installation. Must be removed within 7 days. Leon read it twice. Then again. Unauthorized. He looked at the pole, the bracket, the flag itself. There was nothing unauthorized about honoring the country that nearly killed him and gave him back scars in return. He marched down the street to the HOA office, a 2-room prefab building tucked behind the tennis courts, and walked straight in. Behind the desk was a man in his early 40s. Crew cut. Mirror sunglasses resting on his collar. Tan skin. Heavy boots. A security badge clipped to his belt. Officer Mark Dwyer. HOA Enforcement Supervisor. "You left this," Leon said, placing the notice on the desk. Dwyer didn't look up. "Yes, sir. You're not permitted to erect external structures without board approval. That's a flagpole, son. For the American flag. I don't care if it's for the Queen of England. It's still a violation." Leon raised an eyebrow. "Did you serve?" he asked quietly. Dwyer didn't flinch. "Don't have to. I enforce the rules." Leon leaned forward, voice still calm. "You ever lose a friend overseas? Bury one? Ever watch a kid bleed out on sand hotter than asphalt?" Dwyer stared at him, blank. "No? Then don't tell me what this flag means or where it can fly." And with that, Leon turned and left. The fines came fast. $100 per day. Then $150. Then a notice of lien against the property. HOA newsletters mentioned ongoing non-compliance. Neighbors started whispering. Some nodded support quietly. Others called him difficult. Leon stood his ground. He didn't shout. Didn't threaten. He just kept the flag flying. Until one Friday morning, 3 weeks after that first notice, he opened his front door and found an eviction warning taped to it. Notice of foreclosure action. Initiated by HOA for unpaid assessments. They were trying to take his house. For flying the flag he'd bled for. Leon Rivers didn't shout. He didn't protest. He pulled out a file folder. It was beige, weathered, and full of fire. He'd labeled it Civilian Warfare in black Sharpie. Inside was every piece of paper the HOA had ever mailed him, photocopies of his responses, printouts of email exchanges, and a spreadsheet tracking every fine they'd charged over the past 2 years. Because this wasn't the first time the HOA had come after him. It was just the first time they tried to steal his home over it. 2 years earlier, the HOA fined him for a solar-powered security light over his garage. Too bright. He dimmed it. Then for using a non-regulation mailbox. He had to repaint it beige. Then for parking too close to the curb on his own driveway. It was never about the rules. It was about him. The black veteran in a neighborhood that looked like a retirement brochure, White fences, white picket fences, and white board members. So he started documenting. "I didn't serve this country to be stalked by a clipboard," he said once to a neighbor. She nodded but said nothing. People rarely did. The HOA held its next monthly board meeting in the community clubhouse, and this time, Leon showed up. The room was filled with polite tension. Plastic chairs. Donuts. A dry erase board with "Enforcement Review" scribbled on it. 5 board members sat behind a folding table. Dwyer stood off to the side with his arms crossed. Leon walked to the center of the room and placed a stack of papers on the lectern. He didn't yell. He didn't flinch. He began reading. Dates of fines. Photos of other homes with the same flag setup, untouched. Printouts of emails showing delayed responses. A highlighted section of the federal flag code. And finally, the kicker, a copy of the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005, which barred HOAs from banning flag displays on residential property. He looked up. "I suggest y'all read it before you come for my porch." Silence. Then someone coughed. Then a slow clap started in the back. 2 neighbors. Then 4. Then the whole left side of the room was applauding. Dwyer didn't clap. He left. The next day, Leon received a notice from the HOA's legal representative. It wasn't an apology. It was an escalation. They claimed he owed $4,800 in unpaid fines. That if he didn't pay within 14 days, foreclosure proceedings would begin. He scanned the letter, then smiled, because now he had exactly what he needed, proof of harassment. He made one phone call. To his lawyer. And another. To the local news. 3 days later, a van from Channel 9 parked outside his house. The reporter was young, black, and hungry. Leon gave her everything. The documents. The footage. His military record. She stood in front of his porch while the flag waved behind her and said, "A veteran, his flag, and the battle he didn't expect to fight against his own HOA." By sunset, the story was airing in 5 counties. The headline read, "Decorated Veteran Threatened with Eviction Over American Flag." It spread faster than the board expected. And they weren't ready. By morning, Leon's phone was buzzing nonstop. A veterans advocacy group offered pro bono legal help. A congressman retweeted the news clip. Dozens of residents in his HOA started emailing the board demanding answers. But the most satisfying response? An email from a neighbor who'd always looked away. "I stayed silent too long. I'm with you now. Tell me how to help." Leon didn't need an army. He just needed the truth. And it was now louder than any HOA threat. Leon wasn't trying to be a hero. He just wanted to be left alone. But when they came for the flag, they made it political. When they threatened his home, they made it personal. And when they ignored the law, they made it national. It came 2 days after the news piece aired. Leon was in his kitchen, cleaning out his coffee maker, when the phone rang. A known number. He let it go to voicemail. Then it rang again. He answered. "Mr. Rivers? This is Congresswoman Elena Graves. I saw your story." Leon blinked. She continued, voice firm but warm. "I want to help you tell the nation what happened." Meanwhile, at the HOA office, Mark Dwyer slammed the remote onto the table. "Turn this trash off," he barked, staring at the news segment playing on the clubhouse TV. The boardroom was quiet. For once. Because this wasn't just a PR mess anymore. It was a legal one. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 was trending on Twitter. And people were asking, why is a veteran being punished for honoring the flag? Board members fidgeted. Their inboxes were overflowing. Even their attorneys started backing away. "Look," he said carefully, "we might need to consider mediation before this becomes a lawsuit." Dwyer shook his head. "I'm not backing down. He's not special." The silence that followed was colder than any lawsuit threat. Leon didn't want the attention. But he understood the assignment. He went on a local radio station with Congresswoman Graves. They talked about housing discrimination. They talked about veterans' rights. They talked about how HOAs had slowly turned into private governments, with almost no oversight. Callers lit up the phone lines. "I got fined for hanging a wreath," said one woman. They threatened to tow my husband's car from our own driveway, said another. And finally, a retired Marine called in. Leon, if you run for mayor, you got my vote. Leon chuckled. But inside, something shifted. This wasn't just his fight anymore. Graves' team ran a search through the HOA's recent violations list. What they found? 87% of fines issued that year were to minority residents. White residents had similar violations but received only warnings. Dwyer had personally signed off on 90% of the eviction notices. The HOA board hadn't had a Black or Latino member in 6 years. It was a pattern. And patterns are evidence. 1 week later, a massive billboard appeared outside the neighborhood's main entrance. Statue of Liberty, support veterans. Defend the flag. Stop HOA abuse. Next to it, a photo of Leon, hand over heart, standing beneath his flag. It was paid for by a national veterans group. And the message was clear. This wasn't about one man anymore. This was a movement. On a Monday morning, Leon opened his mailbox and found a certified envelope from the HOA. It wasn't another fine. It was a withdrawal. We hereby rescind all penalties, fees, and foreclosure notices related to flag display violations. But there was no apology. No acknowledgement. Just quiet retreat. Leon smiled. Not because he won, but because they knew they lost. The HOA thought it was over. They withdrew the fines. Buried the foreclosure notice. Tried to move on like nothing happened. But the neighborhood wasn't ready to forget. And neither was Leon. Because this fight had exposed something deeper than a flag. It had exposed a culture of fear dressed up as neighborhood rules. And people were done being quiet. It started as a clipboard. Leon wasn't trying to lead a movement. He just wanted the neighborhood to choose better. He went door to door. Some people opened with apologies. Others hesitated, then signed. A few slammed their doors. That was fine. He wasn't knocking for everyone. Just for the ones who were ready to speak. Within 3 days, he had 76 signatures. That was enough. The bylaws were clear. Any HOA board member could be removed by a majority vote. Dwyer didn't just have enemies now. He had ballots coming for him. The emergency HOA meeting was packed. More people showed up than anyone expected. Fold-out chairs ran out. People stood in the back. One neighbor live-streamed the whole thing on Instagram. Leon sat in the front row, arms folded. Dwyer stood at the podium, defensive and sweaty. He tried to keep it procedural. We followed regulations. The flagpole was a structural violation. A woman interrupted. Federal law says otherwise. And you knew it. Another neighbor stood up. My mother's a Korean War widow. You find her for her memorial plaque. Murmurs grew louder. Leon didn't speak. He didn't need to. The crowd was doing it for him now. The ballot box was passed row by row. Names on slips. Folded. Leon watched as the community decided what kind of place it really wanted to be. 30 minutes later, the results were in. 3 board members were recalled, including Dwyer. There was no applause. Just a heavy silence. Like the weight of power had finally shifted. Dwyer found Leon in the parking lot. No swagger now. No clipboard. Just a man who had been exposed and erased. You happy now? He asked. Leon turned, looked him in the eye. I'm not happy. I'm free. Dwyer nodded once. Then left. No handshake. Just consequences. Weeks later, a neighborhood teenager knocked on Leon's door. He looked nervous. Maybe 16. Mr. Rivers? He asked. I used to think the rules were fair. But after what they did to you, I'm not sure anymore. Leon smiled gently. That's how it starts. You ask questions. Then you start fixing what's broken. The kid looked at the flag flapping above the porch. Can you show me how to put one up too? Leon stepped outside, took a breath. Let's do it together. A month passed. The neighborhood was quieter now. No more surprise fines. No more anonymous warning slips taped to mailboxes. No more whispered threats disguised as policy reminders. For the first time in years, Leon felt something close to peace. But peace isn't the same as closure. So when Memorial Day neared, he knew what he had to do. It started with a conversation. The same teen who asked Leon to help him raise a flag came back. "I was thinking," he said, "what if we did something for the ones who didn't make it back?" Leon blinked. "You mean like a memorial?" The boy nodded. "For everyone. Not just soldiers. Neighbors. People who got pushed out. People who were forgotten." Leon smiled. "I like that." So they started planning. At first, it was just talk. Then the neighbors started giving. A retired teacher donated art supplies. A young couple offered to print flyers. An older man quietly handed Leon a folded $100 bill. "For the ones I couldn't save." Word spread. Within 2 weeks, the community had raised over $2,400. Not for a monument, but for a living space. A place to gather. To remember. To breathe. They called it the Garden of Memory. They cleared a small, unused patch of land near the cul-de-sac fountain. It had once been designated for future development, but had sat empty for years. Now it became sacred ground. Neighbors dug, planted, painted. Kids painted flags on small stones. Veterans helped install benches. Mothers brought lemonade and stories. Leon installed one plaque. Simple. Unpolished. For those who served and those we lost. And underneath, in smaller text, "Freedom isn't in the rules. It's in the remembering." Memorial Day morning was overcast, not gloomy, but hushed. Like the sky itself knew what was coming. People arrived in silence. No speeches. No politicians. No cameras. Just presence. Leon wore his old uniform jacket. Not for pride. For the ones who couldn't. At the center of the garden, he placed a folded flag. Not the one from his porch. A different one. The one they gave him after his best friend, Carter, was flown home in silence. He didn't say a word. He didn't have to. Near the back, someone stood out. Not for what he wore, just jeans and a polo. But for who he was. Mark Dwyer. No clipboard. No badge. Just a man who looked smaller now. He kept his head down. Didn't speak. At the end, he walked up to Leon. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "About all of it." Leon looked at him. "I know," he said. "But this isn't about you." And he turned back to the flag. Later that week, the community voted to rename the park space permanently. Leon Rivers Memorial Garden. Leon protested, of course. "It's not about me." But the people insisted. Because while the flag had sparked the fire, it was how he stood that made them want to change. The memorial garden didn't change the world. But it changed something. Neighbors lingered there longer now. Teens walked by a little slower. The silence felt less heavy, like the neighborhood was breathing again. But Leon knew better. For every garden like this, there were still gates. Still clipboards. Still people in power who hadn't been touched by consequence. It started with a handwritten envelope from Virginia. Inside, a note. "They threatened to foreclose because I had a bumper sticker. Thank you for not backing down." Then another. And another. Emails. Social DMs. Phone calls to his lawyer. Black veterans. Single mothers. Immigrants. Older homeowners. All sharing the same story. Unfair violations. Predatory fines. Selective enforcement. One woman in Texas had lost her home because she installed a wheelchair ramp without aesthetic clearance. Leon started keeping a folder again. This one wasn't for defense. It was for documentation. One afternoon, a local university invited him to speak. Not just about the flag, the professor said. About power and place. Leon wasn't sure. He wasn't a speaker. He was a doer. But he went. He stood in front of 200 students. Read some of the letters. If you ever think you're safe because you did everything right, ask yourself who's still driving around with the power to say you didn't. The room was silent. Then someone clapped. Then more. Until the whole room stood up. Under pressure from the media, the HOA released a formal statement. It was 2 paragraphs of passive language. "We regret that recent events have caused concern. We strive to enforce rules fairly and without prejudice." But nowhere in the statement was Leon's name. Nowhere was there an apology. no responsibility. So Leon wrote his own response. He posted it online. Simple. Direct. You can't fix what you won't name. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking for protection for the ones still driving. It was shared over 100,000 times. The local news returned, this time with a different tone. It wasn't just a story now. It was part of a series, HOA Power and Abuse in America. Leon wasn't the victim anymore. He was the anchor. They filmed him walking through the memorial garden, talking to teens, reading letters aloud, and finally, standing beside a new sign posted at the neighborhood entrance. Stop sign, this community does not enforce rules that violate federal law. It wasn't just decorative. It was a promise. Leon got into his car late one evening, just to clear his head. He drove past the garden, past the homes he once feared might betray him. He saw porch lights, flags, kids' toys left on lawns, imperfections. He smiled. But as he turned out of the subdivision, he passed a patrol car from another neighborhood. The cop looked at him a second too long. Leon's fingers tensed on the wheel. Because some things hadn't changed. And some battles still waited on the shoulder. The morning after that late-night drive, Leon couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the stare. That long, quiet stare from the patrol car. The kind of look that asks no questions, just makes judgments. The kind of look that comes before the lights flash. He hadn't done anything wrong. And yet, his body still knew how to brace. At the local VA gym, Leon ran into an old friend, Marcus, retired Air Force, now working as a therapist for returning vets. Marcus noticed the tension in Leon's shoulders. You still driving like every mirror's a weapon? He asked. Leon didn't laugh. I won the HOA thing. Changed the policy. Changed the board. And? Leon paused. And I still feel like I'm wearing a target. A local nonprofit invited Leon to speak at a town hall. The theme, safe neighborhoods and real accountability. Panelists included a police sergeant, a city council rep, a retired teacher, and Leon. During Q&A, a teenager raised her hand. How do I make them see me as a person before they see me as a problem? Silence. Then Leon leaned forward. You can't make them, he said. But you can make sure everyone else sees it. Loudly. Repeatedly. Truthfully. Until it's impossible to ignore. Days later, a manila envelope arrived at Leon's door. No return address. No markings. Inside was a short letter. Asterisk, I was one of the cops watching your news story in the break room. We all laughed when it started. But we stopped laughing halfway through. You didn't raise your voice. You just told the truth. I'm not brave enough to say this in uniform. But you made me think. Thank you. Leon read it twice. Then a third time. Then he folded it neatly and placed it in the back of his new folder. The local library added a new exhibit, Voices of Our Streets. Portraits of residents. Snippets of letters. Photos of change. In the center, a large print of Leon in front of the memorial garden, holding the folded flag. Below it, a quote. Sometimes the quietest man in the room is the one carrying the heaviest truth. People stopped and stared. Some took photos. Some cried. Some simply stood still. At home, Leon sat with his daughter and grandson. The boy was 9. Restless. He asked, Grandpa, do you think I'll ever have to fight like you? Leon paused, then answered, If I do this right, maybe not. But if you ever do, you won't have to do it alone. The rules had changed. No more fines over flags. No more threats taped to doors. No more silent enforcement officers driving past with clipboards. But the unwritten rules? Those didn't disappear. Because power doesn't just sit in policy. It hides in glances. It breathes in assumptions. And sometimes, it shows up in silence. Leon was trimming hedges when a neighbor, Linda, mid-40s, polite but cautious, walked by. She slowed her steps. I just wanted to say, she hesitated, what you did was brave. Leon nodded but said nothing. Then she added, quieter. But maybe now it's time to blend in again? Leon blinked. Blend into what? She gave a tight smile and walked off. He stood still for a long time. Blending in was what they wanted before he put up the flag. Now that he'd made a space for remembrance, some still preferred forgetting. A new HOA board, diverse, cautiously reformist, invited Leon to be a community liaison. It wasn't performative. They meant it. They wanted him to review policies, help handle complaints, bring humanity back to enforcement. He accepted, but with one condition. No clipboards. Just conversations. A black teenager was cited by security for loitering outside the pool gate. She was waiting for her mom to bring the keycard. Leon was called in to mediate. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't flash authority. He asked the guard, a young recruit, one question. If she looked like your niece, would you still call this loitering? The guard couldn't answer. The fine was dismissed. But the tension? It lingered. One afternoon, Leon sat at the Memorial Garden bench. An older white man, Ron, longtime resident, sat beside him. Ron didn't say anything at first. But when I moved here, I didn't think of any of this. Rules were rules. But maybe the rules were never made for all of us the same way. Leon nodded slowly. That's the thing about rules. If they don't leave room for truth, they just become punishment. At a community town hall, a girl, probably 14, braids, nervous hands, stood up to speak. I used to be scared to walk past the clubhouse alone, she said. But when I saw your picture on the library wall, I felt safer. Leon didn't reply right away. His voice cracked just a little when he did. Then I guess I'll stay up on that wall as long as you need me to. It came in the form of a letter. Plain white envelope. No official seal. No return address. Just her name, typed neatly across the front. Inside, one page. A printed apology. It was from Officer Travis Colburn. Maya stared at it for several minutes before she even unfolded the paper. Something about the symmetry of it felt wrong. Too clean. Too easy. The letter opened with formal regret, quoted policy, acknowledged the incident. It ended with a short sentence. I hope one day you can forgive me. She read that line 3 times. Not because she was moved, but because she wasn't. She sat in silence, the letter in one hand, a cooling mug of tea in the other. The city buzzed outside her window, horns, sirens, the hum of life resuming. But something inside her remained still. Forgiveness, she knew, wasn't just a word you sent in the mail. It was a reckoning. And Colburn hadn't faced one. He hadn't come to the hearing with humility. He hadn't looked her in the eye that day. And now, months later, he sent a single-page letter like it could erase the moment her face hit the hood of her car. Like it could erase the silence from the officers who stood by. Like it could erase history. She didn't respond. Not because she couldn't. Because she wouldn't. Some things are not healed by acknowledgement. They are healed by accountability. She still hadn't seen a department-wide apology. Still hadn't seen new laws passed in her district. Still hadn't seen a national database for traffic stop misconduct. Words were air. And she was tired of breathing them without action. At a university panel on police reform, Maya sat alongside law enforcement leaders, legal scholars, and activists. A young officer on the panel tried to play devil's advocate. But what if Officer Colburn genuinely learned from this? What if he's changed? Doesn't he deserve the chance to prove that? Maya's face remained unreadable. Then she answered, change is not about the comfort of the one who caused harm. It's about the healing of the ones who lived through it. She looked at the officer. Her voice didn't rise. Ask yourself this. Would you be asking me to be gracious if I hadn't had a badge? If I hadn't survived? The room fell quiet. Because they all knew the answer. That night she wrote a letter too. Not to Colburn. To a mother in Louisiana whose son had been shot during a routine stop. The boy had no weapon. Just headphones in and a backpack on. Maya wrote, I wish I could tell you that what happened to me prevented this. I wish I could say my badge made the world safer for all of us. But change isn't a moment. It's a movement. And I won't stop pushing until your son's name means something more than pain. She mailed it the next morning. No return address. Just a message. Weeks later, She spoke at a rally in Philadelphia. Rain poured over umbrellas. Protest signs bobbed like buoys in a restless sea. She stepped onto the stage, rain sliding down her face like salt. I was told the system would protect me because I worked for it. But what saved me wasn't the badge. It was a photo. And if that scares you, it should. Cheers. Shouts. Fists in the air. She continued. I will not clap for apologies that come too late. I will not bow to systems that only listen when one of their own bleeds. The crowd surged with her voice. Because too many of them were still waiting for letters. Letters that never came. And still, the work. She placed Colburn's letter in a drawer. Not with her important documents. With her reminders. Her list of names. Her stack of witness statements. Her printouts of policies never enforced. It stayed there. Not as a sign of forgiveness. But as proof. That words were easy. But truth had weight. And justice, if it meant anything, couldn't arrive by envelope. There's a road Maya Porter used to fear. It wasn't because of its curves or traffic lights. It was because of what happened there. The night her identity, her dignity, her silence were all challenged at once. That same road became a scar in her memory. But scars, she'd learned, don't just mark pain. They mark survival. This time, she drove the route intentionally. No detour. No GPS trick. Same silver car. Same dashboard photo. But the woman in the driver's seat? She wasn't the same. This Maya didn't lower her voice to avoid discomfort. She didn't carry guilt that wasn't hers. She didn't ask for space. She took it. Later, sitting alone in the memorial garden she helped fund, Maya thought about what people kept calling that night. An incident. But it wasn't just an incident. It was a symptom. A glimpse into a pattern where being calm, compliant, and professional still wasn't enough. Where respect had to be proven, not assumed. Where justice arrived too late, and only if someone was watching. After her story went public, letters poured in. From women. From veterans. From mothers who'd buried sons. From officers who'd once been silent, but said they couldn't be anymore. One woman wrote, "Your photo on the dashboard saved your life. My daughter didn't have one." That line haunted Maya. Because her survival felt like luck, not protection. The truth? She was just one name in a long, unfinished list. Some had cameras. Some had witnesses. Many had neither. And most never got a letter. Never got an apology. Never got to speak back. So now Maya speaks for them. Before leaving the garden, she pulled out her notebook and wrote a single message. If the system still forgets our names, then we must become louder than its silence. She closed the book. And walked forward, not as a victim, but as a mirror, a reminder, a voice, and a road now owned, not avoided. If you watched the story and felt something stir, anger, grief, reflection, then don't let that stay quiet. Talk about it. Share it. Learn from it. Because Maya's story isn't fiction. It's a reflection of what's still happening. To neighbors. To sisters. To daughters. To someone you know. Let's not wait for the next incident to care. If this story moved you, like the video to spread it, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to this channel for more powerful stories like this one. Because silence has a cost, but your voice? That's power.